We have a PowerPoint that I think will be on the screen. A couple things I want to do. I want to thank several people who in the community have been very helpful in this process, have been engaged all along. Specifically, local attorney Aaron Case, Rotary Club President Eric Silvers, Pastor Phil Vargas, Council Member Funk, former city manager Meyer Hoff, and the Yakima Police Patrolmen's Association, who the public may know as the Union or think of as the Union. They have all been engaged since the beginning and have been very helpful. We've met several times, and as I go through and explain this, I think you'll see that the work was really extensive. So if you see all the folks here behind me, the entire command staff as far as the division commanders are here, and several of the shift commanders are here. Of course, we're a 24-hour organization, so we couldn't have everybody here from the command staff. But the reason I did that is I really want the public and the council to know that this is a unified message, that across the department, these are all the leaders of the department. They have all agreed and embraced and engaged in this process. This is not me speaking to the community, this is the police department. This is not my changes, this is our changes. And we fully support it as a department, and we want the community to know that, because I think that's very important. I don't want people to think that these are just feel-good things that we did to satisfy discontent. The second thing I want to do before I launch into this is, well, let me just say this. So what happened was Councilmember Funk had a motion in June. This was after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, and of course there were protests across the country, including in Yakima. There were almost 2 weeks straight of protests by Black Lives Matter activists who were, as I had said at the time and will say again, incredibly polite and respectful, absolutely peaceful protest, and we heard them. Many of us interacted with them during those protests, and we absolutely heard what they had to say, and many members of the public as well. And so this process began at that point. You may recall we submitted a document to you giving you statistics and facts and data about the Yakima Police Department and where we were compared to some other countries, just so that there was a frame of reference. This is the second half of that request. I think we may have done more than anybody thought we were going to do. What we did was take this opportunity to look at our entire use of force policy and every policy that reflects on it, and then some other things that I'm going to mention here in this PowerPoint. This is not a long PowerPoint, but the packet that we submitted is long. I don't believe in reading to people, and I don't want to bore you. So I'm going to give you kind of a executive summary of the executive summary, which is also in your packet. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions, but I also don't want to put everybody to sleep, because this is a lot of work and it's very complex. So I'm trying to dance a line here between making sure to touch what's really important for everybody to hear and not put everybody to sleep. So before I launch into that, I also want to thank Officer Miles Inbury, Sergeant Matt Sutton, and Sergeant Einar Agladal, Lieutenants Tori Adams and Chad Janice, and two of the captains here, Sean Boyle and Jay Celia. They're our only captains, actually. Every one of these people spent a huge amount of time going over policy again and again and again, looking at this, arguing about this, talking about this, trying to determine what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, what could we do, what can't we do. I mean, it was a lot of work, and we did it in a pretty short time. You may recall it was an open-ended time frame on this, but we really set a date of September 15th, and here we are. So I'm proud of that work. I want to thank all of you for that, because it was not easy, and we made it. We got in by the deadline. We had a lot of local residents look at this too before we came to you. So that's the point we're at. So with that, I will launch into this. I have set the priority for the Yakima Police Department as the reduction of violent crime through exceptional customer service. I wanted a simple message and something we could deliver on and we should deliver on. You've heard me talk about it before. I won't belabor it, but there's too much violent crime in Yakima. We had a 14-year-old killed last night in this city. That's a community failure. That breaks my heart. I hope it breaks your hearts. But as we reduce that crime, we have to do it in a manner that people feel respected. And I think that's the heart of this entire process. I think that's really the question and the demand that the community is making of us. And so as we go about our business, every one of these leaders expects exceptional customer service from their staff. And when we don't get it, we're going to take care of it. And that's just a basic. And you should be able to ask any Yakima police employee what the mission is, and that's what you'll hear. And if you don't, I'd like to know about it and get a name. All right. Despite the need for this process, I really think it's really important to let you know that as many cities across this country were burning, Yakima was not. I think that speaks loud about our community. I think that speaks loud about our support, and I think it speaks loudly about this police department. Long before I got here, they were doing great work and really engaged with the community, and I have to give all of these people credit for that. I did not change this, and I'm only here to help. Hopefully we can all make it better. You can always get better. But I think that's an important point to make. We had so much community support through letters, emails, gestures, gifts, cupcakes, lunches. I mean, it goes on and on. These masks were made for us by the community. I mean, just on and on and on. That we started collecting them. Jeanette Mora's team did, and every day they put those out in an email to officers. Included in your packet is 72 pages of support from the Yakima community for this police department, and I think that speaks very loudly. So I wanted to make sure you understood and knew that. The next thing I want to talk about is the majority of the changes we made were the use of force policy. It made us more transparent, it made data more accessible, and I'm going to talk about reporting and how we review and discipline as well. I want to say too that there were a lot of policies already in place throughout the policy manual. They were just scattered. So not all of these policies are brand new. They're just moved within the use of force policy so that it's very easy for the community to find them. So people might have thought, oh, they don't have a policy about that, canines. Well, yeah, we did. It's just now it's all referenced in one place, so it's easy for people to take a look at that and see for themselves what the policy is. And then some of those policies were also changed. Lieutenant Adams, he was sergeant a week ago, so he's one of the guys helping us out here. So there are a couple things I'm going to point out. I won't take a whole long time, but you all received numerous requests from citizens at the beginning of the George Floyd case from the group 8 Can't Wait. And Councilmember Funk pointed out I had a typo. It's 8 cannot. So this is what the group across the country is asking police departments to do. And where there's a green check mark, we're doing it. And so the only two I'm really going to talk about are the ones we're not doing, and to give you a sense of why we're not doing that. So up at the top where it says exhaust all alternatives before shooting, that is just patently unreasonable. If Lieutenant Stevens gets out of a car and some guy's pointing a gun at two people, I don't expect him to use his taser, his baton, his mace to exhaust all alternatives before addressing that threat and saving that person's life is just not reasonable. So that's why we're not going to do that, and it frankly is not safe. And then a use of force continuum. Basically, for folks at home, that means hands, baton, mace, taser, and it's kind of a ladder. And one of the things that police departments found is when you had a ladder, oftentimes when people used a taser and it didn't work, they would automatically go to deadly force. Well, that's not what we want to do. So a ladder is not necessarily the most effective way. What's the most effective is to train your officers on how to use force depending on the situation, rethink the situation, reassess, with the goal of not having to use deadly force. That's why we're not adopting that. And then would you put up the next one too? I think really important is the Police Executive Research Forum. It's really the top think tank in America. A few years ago, they developed 30 principles as the guiding principles for law enforcement agencies across the country in how to develop use of force standards. You can see we met 28 out of 30, and the only two we don't meet are because it's not applicable to us. So number 29 is well-trained call takers and dispatchers. We have spoken with the Communications Bureau about this. They're aware. They do have some challenges with training because the goal is to have them all trained in crisis intervention training as well, but they don't work for us. So it's a recommendation we've made. I'm sure they'll be looking at it. I'm sure the fire chief will talk to me about this when we're over. But that, just so you know, it's not something we can control, so it's not applicable. And then the second thing is to educate families of persons with mental illness on communicating with call takers and first responders. Lieutenant Adams, again, did a great job reaching out to NAMI, which is an organization that supports mental ill families, families with mental illness issues. And they are more than happy. They do that training now. They're more than happy to help do that in our community. And they're, frankly, far more qualified to do that training than we would be. But we're happy to do that in partnership. So you can take that down. Thank you. But you can see, after we got done, that was our roadmap. And we looked, all those people I mentioned, looked at every single one of those, looked at our policy, and found how we could get in line with that best practice. And so you can see overwhelmingly we did exactly that. The next thing I want to talk about is carotid control technique, often wrongly called the chokehold. We don't choke people. Choking is restricting the air. Carotid is restricting the blood. However, we removed it. It's clearly what's happening across the country. So we are going to remove that. One of the things I want to point out, though, and I want to make very clear to the public, is that these will take effect in February. It takes a while to change the ship. We're going to have to retrain officers, look at new techniques, because crime's not going to stop, as we found last night. We're still going to have to address crime. We're going to have to address violent behavior. I wish all of the people who resist us would also go through a list and quit doing that, but we're going to have to use force sometimes. It's unfortunate. It doesn't look good, but it's necessary. There are times it's necessary, and I want the public to know that too. This does not mean force will go away. And I would also caution people that the more less lethal options you take away from the police, you're going to go back to when I started in 1991. There was hands, baton, and shoot. So this whole movement of reducing less lethal options may not be the desired consequence. And I just would ask people, as you think about this, try and remember, as ugly as some of this may look, at least they're not dead. And so, but I'm not trying to argue for this. I'm just letting you know that we have to be careful about reducing less lethal techniques because they're less lethal. So we will be removing this unless deadly force. You can use, if it's a deadly force situation, you could still do this. We're changing entirely the way we report use of force. I think we actually did a pretty good job before, but we're now going to train officers to say these things. Every report will have to say what efforts at de-escalation were made, and if none, why not? Was the officer in a position of legal authority to take an action in the first place? Was the force reasonable? Was it appropriate? And was it necessary? And then, and was it proportional to the situation? You know, Eric Garner was selling single cigarettes, and we ended up with a fatality. We have to try to keep our actions proportional to the situation that we're dealing with and faced with. But then these people here will also have to, when reviewing force, ask the same questions. Was the officer's reason for not using de-escalation correct? And those will be how people will be viewed. Officers will be viewed, and their actions will be viewed. Obviously, that's a major change. That's going to take some time. We'll have some bumps along the way, but we will get there. Transparency. Another major shift that we're going to be doing here at Yakima, we've already started, is having a lot more transparency to the community. When there's a high-profile incident, we will talk about it. We will explain what the facts are, a timeline, what all the laws and policies that are related to that incident were, what the incident went through as far as a review process, what my decision is about discipline or no discipline, and then any changes that we may have made as a department as a result. We will do that in all high-profile incidents. That's number one. It's already on our website under a tab that's called Transparency, and I welcome people to go there. We'll keep them there so that there's a record of that. We've also updated our website. We have a brand new website. There's a lot more information, including crime data, including use of force data. You can now look yourself. You can see for yourself on a dashboard exactly what our use of force looked like. Is it quarterly, Lieutenant? So soon it'll be dynamic, and it'll change every day based on what's happening. I think that's a push that we're going to be getting, data push. We're also going to join the FBI's initiative, I think we already have, about reporting our use of force to the national website, which we weren't doing before, but we're going to do now. So that's more availability of records and transparency about how we do things and what it looks like. Finally, I think it's finally, yeah. So finally, we also created a new position. There was a lot of concern. Interesting, my boss right away, of course, he's watching the budget, did the right thing and checked. This is not a newly funded position. We're not taking anybody's duties away. We're reallocating a position and moving some of those duties elsewhere. This detective, who was a major crimes detective, so he investigated robbery, major assaults, and homicide, is now going to be investigating uses of force or allegations of use of force. And they'll be in the professional standards office, most people know as internal affairs. He already had a case that he started working on, so I think it's going to help a lot. That position will also make recommendations to a training committee that we're going to establish within professional standards about maybe data trends. We need more training in batons. We need training on this, or whatever it is that we find in those force incidents. I think that will help a lot, and having that level of investigation will also help. So finally, I just want to let you know there's another document in there. Most of these slides were pulled from it, but there's more information on there. That's really the executive summary. I included both the policies, the new one and the old one, and I think there's even more documents in there. But it's pretty long because it was a lengthy policy. But you can see that we've done a lot of work, made a lot of changes. I think we're going to be better for it, and with patience, I think within a few months we'll be hitting on all cylinders, and hopefully that'll be better for everybody involved. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So thank you, Chief.